We now look at how you can work with a workbook containing multiple Merlin Excel reports. Up until now, we have only looked at how to refresh and update the point of view of individual worksheets, but there may be times when you want to change the point of view of all the reports in a workbook at one go. And there are two ways that you can do this with Merlin Excel. The first way is to add a contents page to the workbook. When the contents page is active, changing the point of view in the POV panel updates the point of view of all the worksheets in the workbook. Although the contents page allows you to control the point of view of all the worksheets from one worksheet, you still have the flexibility to change the point of view on each individual worksheet, and each individual worksheet can have a separate connection to different applications. The second approach is to start with a single POV workbook. In a single POV workbook, all the worksheets have the same connection and use the same background point of view. Single POV workbooks only support the standard Merlin Excel type reports, which means you can't use data tables or process management reports in these workbooks. But the advantage of a single POV workbook is the refresh time is much quicker, particularly for larger volumes of data. That's because with a single POV workbook, the entire workbook is refreshed in one operation, whereas with the contents page approach, each sheet is refreshed separately. We're going to start by looking at how you would add a contents page to a workbook of Merlin Excel reports. In this workbook, we have 4 different Merlin Excel reports. To add a workbook contents control sheet, we select the option from the Add New Report underneath the Report Wizard menu. And this will add the contents page to the front of the workbook. The contents page contains an Excel table listing each of the worksheets in the workbook. For each worksheet, the table lists the worksheet name, the title of the report, the point of view, the connection, the status of the report, and when it was last refreshed. And the POV panel displays the point of view that will control the entire workbook. Double-clicking on a row in the table will take you to that worksheet. Each worksheet still has its own point of view that is displayed in its POV panel. And if you update the point of view, it updates only the active worksheet. To navigate back to the contents page, you can always use the Contents ribbon button. And the contents table will display the updated point of view on the worksheet. And note that if the point of view on any of the worksheet differs from the point of view on the contents page, it is shaded in green. Similarly, if the connection on the worksheet report is different to the connection on the contents page, it is also highlighted in green. The details in the contents table are linked to the worksheets by a formula. For example, if you were to change a worksheet name, the contents table would automatically update. You can also change the report title from the contents page. Right-clicking on the title cell displays the Merlin Excel option to change the title. I'll change this to Production Income Statement, for example. We see that the contents table is updated with the new title, and when we double-click on the row to go to the worksheet, we see that the wizard title cell has been updated. When the contents page is active, changing the point of view in the POV panel will update the point of view for all the worksheets in the workbook. So for example, if I choose one of the entity favorites, the point of view and data is updated on each of the worksheets, even on the worksheets that are connected to a different application than the one on the contents page. So long as the dimension and the selected member exists in that application, the worksheet will be updated. So changing the point of view on the contents page allows you to update the point of view of all the worksheets. And the contents table allows you to see the point of view on each worksheet. The contents table also shows you whether each sheet is in report or design mode. For example, if we change this sheet to design mode, we see that the design mode status is clearly highlighted. If we were to add a new report to the workbook, perhaps by downloading a report from the report library, then back in the contents page, we would need to select the Refresh Worksheet option to update the contents table so that the new worksheet is displayed. And if we wanted to refresh the data in every worksheet in the workbook, we'd select the Refresh Workbook option. And the contents table is updated with the time and duration of the workbook refresh. So the Contents Control worksheet can be added to an existing workbook to control the point of view and data refresh of all the worksheets in the workbook at one go. Now we'll have a look at the second way of managing an entire workbook by opening a single workbook POV template and building our reports in that. The advantage of the single POV workbook is that it's much quicker for refreshing larger volumes of data. From the Report Wizard menu, we select Add New Report and then the single POV workbook option. And this opens a new workbook template containing 4 worksheets. The first worksheet, the POV sheet, contains the connection to HFM and the POV that will be used in the workbook. The POV for the workbook is displayed in the blue panel on the left, and to the right is an Excel table displaying a list of all the Excel worksheets in the workbook. The workbook also contains some information and examples. For example, the example worksheet shows how you can convert a report into a data entry form using the export keyword. How to use data entry is covered in another video. The About This Workbook sheet has information on when to use the POV workbook and how to use certain features within it. These 2 worksheets are provided for information purposes only and can be deleted, as they're not required for the operation of the single POV workbook. The template worksheet is an example report and can be used as the starting point for new reports in the workbook. You can use either the Merlin Excel Utilities function or the standard Excel Copy Worksheet function to copy the Excel worksheet. Alternatively, you can just insert a new blank worksheet and build the reporter by adding in the keywords yourself. But copying the template gives you a ready-made report with all the keywords and formulas already entered. And then you can rename the worksheet. And you can also enter a title for the report in the Wizard title cell. We'll look at how that feeds through to the POV sheet in a second. But first I'm going to remove the export keywords. The export keywords are placed at the right and bottom of the report range and indicate which rows and columns should be exported when exporting data. We're not going to be using this workbook for data input, so we can delete the columns and rows that contain the export keyword. With the export keywords gone, the worksheet is just a standard Merlin Excel report range, which can be refreshed with the Refresh Sheet button in the ribbon. I'll just move these cells out of the way for the time being. We can select the POV Worksheet tab or the Workbook Contents button in the ribbon to return to the Contents page. And we can refresh this worksheet again using the Refresh Sheet button in the ribbon. Note that worksheets that start with an underscore, for example _template, are not listed in the Contents page. And the point of view display can be hidden by collapsing the columns. As with the contents table we looked at earlier in the video, double-clicking on a row will take you to that worksheet. To quickly simulate a large report, I'll add the keyword base to the front of this account member substitution variable, so that now when I double-click on the row, the base members of the currently selected account are inserted into the worksheet. Now because each worksheet doesn't have its own background point of view, if I wanted to fix the point of view for this particular worksheet, I can either enter the member labels into every row or every column, or I can enter the member label into the corner cell. So to fix the point of view for this worksheet to Entity PLC, I add the member label to the Merlin Excel keyword corner cell, remembering to type in the description of the entity so that it's clear in the report. And now I'll quickly copy this worksheet to simulate a large workbook containing multiple sheets. And now we have a workbook containing a few sheets, each one set to a different entity. And because all these green report worksheets are identical, I can select all of them at once and modify the formula that displays the background point of view, removing the link to the workbook entity. Because in this particular workbook, each worksheet has its own entity hard-coded into it, and therefore is not linked to the workbook entity. And I'll do the same for the descriptions formula. These background point of view formulas are added purely for information and can be deleted if you don't want them in your report. Back in the POV tab, to update the contents table to reflect all the new worksheets that have been added to the workbook, select the Refresh Sheet button in the Merlin ribbon. And if we want to refresh the entire workbook, we select the button in the POV pane. And all the HFM data in the workbook is updated. However, it should be noted that selecting the Refresh Workbook button does not update the contents table in the POV sheet. To update the POV sheet, you must select the Refresh Sheet button in the ribbon. And the only time you need to refresh the table in the POV sheet is when you've added or deleted worksheets from the workbook. Changing the point of view on the POV sheet will update all the worksheets in the workbook to the new point of view. So if I were to select January from the period favourites, every worksheet in the workbook is updated to January. And as mentioned earlier, using the POV workbook is the quickest way to refresh a large volume of data. When the POV sheet is active, changing to design mode will change the mode on every sheet in the workbook, whereas changing the report mode on an individual report sheet will change only that sheet. If the workbook is going to be used by other users, because for example it has been uploaded to the report library, consideration should be given to hiding the dimensions that are not editable within each worksheet. In design mode, select the visibility option in the POV pane and choose the Change Dimension Visibility option to display the dimension selector form. In this example report, we have hard-coded the entity member label into the corner cell of each worksheet report range. Therefore, the entity displayed in the POV panel is irrelevant because it is overridden in each worksheet. Therefore, we should select to hide the entity dimension in the POV panel. And also for this report, we don't want the user to select any other member from the ICP dimension other than ICP top, so we'll hide that dimension as well. And because of the way this particular report is designed, we don't want users to select any of the custom dimension members either, so we'll hide those. And once we've hidden all the dimensions, we can select OK to close the form. And now switching back to report mode, the entity, ICP and custom dimensions are hidden on the POV panel, so the users cannot change them. Looking at the functionality in a report worksheet, it's worth noting that with the right-click function to display all the base data that consolidates up to a data cell in the report, using a data table creates the data table analysis report in a new workbook and doesn't create it in the existing single POV workbook. That's because the single POV workbook only supports the standard Merlin Excel reports and doesn't support data tables or process management reports. Back now in the Merlin Excel reports, which has been switched to design mode, the template worksheet contains two named formulas, one of which is called Report Has Data. You can use worksheet names to display information in the POV contents panel. So the cell named Report Has Data feeds through to the Has Data column, where conditional formatting displays whether the worksheet contains data or not. And the formula in the cell Report Validation, here displaying false and shaded red, is also displayed as a column in the POV sheet in the validated column. So for example, if the formula in the worksheet returns true, then a tick is displayed, and if the validation formula displays false, then an X is displayed in the row of the table. So when building your reports, if you want to use these formulas, modify these formulas so that they return true if the worksheet contains data, and if you want to include a validation, modify the formula so that returns true if the data is valid and false if it's invalid. If you don't want to use these formulas, Then in the POV sheet, select the Formulas menu and then the Name Manager button. This lists all the named cells and references in the workbook. Sort by scope and look for the POV worksheet. Then look for the names Report Has Data and Report Validation on the POV sheet, and delete them if you don't want them displayed in the POV table. These named cells occur on each worksheet, for example here on the PLC sheet. But to remove them as a column in the POV table, you only need to delete the range in the POV sheet. It is possible to add your own additional columns by adding in new range names, as long as the range name appears in the POV sheet and the other reporting sheets. In this example, I've just deleted the report validation name from the POV sheet. So now when I refresh the POV sheet, the validated column is removed. So the single POV workbook is designed to make it easy for you to build workbooks containing large numbers of worksheets and retrieve large volumes of data and control the POV easily from a single worksheet.